and welcome to the Al Monitor Brief. It's Monday, July 8th. I'm Kristen Tallman. Today's main segment is a conversation with Elizabeth Hagedorn, Al Monitor State Department correspondent, on the recent Iranian elections and what it means for U.S.-Iran relations. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. The Biden administration has dispatched senior officials to Cairo to bridge the remaining gaps between Israel and Hamas on a proposal to end the 9-month war in the Gaza Strip and free the remaining hostages. U.S. and European leaders are expected to focus largely on the war in Ukraine as they gather in Washington this week for the annual NATO summit and the 75th anniversary of the alliance. But the re-emerging conflicts in the Middle East and Pacific continue to loom in the background as the Biden administration seeks to build faith among its allies. Baghdad is silent as Turkey moves deeper against PKK militants in northern Iraq, and Egypt's remittances reach $2.7 billion in a boost to foreign reserves. Now, on to the main segment. Hey, Elizabeth, welcome to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
So, Elizabeth, it's been a busy last few days in Iran as the presidential elections came to an end, with the dubbed reformist candidate Masoud Pezeshkian winning the race. What do we know about Pezeshkian?
In what can be read as a sign of dissatisfaction with the current hardline government, Iranians took to the polls on Friday to elect Pezeshkian, who is a reformist candidate. He walked away with just over 43% of the vote in the runoff, beating ultra-conservative former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili. Pezeshkian is a 69-year-old trained heart surgeon who served in Iran's parliament and as its health minister. He's considered a relative moderate within Iran's ruling establishment. During the brief campaign to replace ultra-conservative Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash in May, Pezeshkian advocated for improved relations with the United States and Europe. He said more constructive relations with the West could help bring Iran out of its isolation. Pezeshkian also said he would negotiate to lift the punishing Western sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy in recent years. His election comes at a sensitive time in Iran's relationship with the West. Tehran faces pressure over its support for Hamas, as well as Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and other regional proxies, and its supply of armed drones to Russia and its rapidly advancing nuclear program have also added to the tensions.
So, Elizabeth, you have done extensive reporting on the relationship between the U.S., Iran, Europe, and Iran. How did the Biden administration react to his election?
We got a brief reaction from the U.S. State Department over the weekend. It acknowledged Pezeshkian's surprise victory, but said the elections were neither free nor fair, a likely reference to the Guardian Council in Iran, which vets the candidates and disqualifies those deemed unloyal to Iran's system of clerical rule. The State Department also said the election of a new president would not have a significant impact on the administration's approach to Iran, and that's largely because the supreme leader, not the president, primarily calls the shots.
Right. And so if the supreme leader makes the final decisions, what could a Pezeshkian presidency mean for Iran relations with the U.S.?
Well, even with Pezeshkian, a relative moderate at the helm, we shouldn't expect a major shift in Iran's foreign policy. Again, as you mentioned, all key decisions are made by the supreme leader. But the president could set a new tone when it comes to engagement with the United States. Over the past year, the two countries have held multiple rounds of indirect talks on issues like Iran's nuclear program and attacks by its proxy forces in the region. We should expect that to continue under Pezeshkian, who has called for greater outreach to the United States. Of course, much also depends on who wins the U.S. election in November. In 2018, former President Donald Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal and imposed heavy sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy. Under a second Trump presidency, it's reasonable to assume a return of so-called maximum pressure on Tehran.
Okay. And should we expect any changes to the Iran nuclear policy specifically?
It's interesting. A familiar face came out in support of Pezeshkian on the campaign, and that was Javad Zarif, the former foreign minister who helped negotiate Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. By enlisting Zarif as his campaign's foreign policy advisor, Pezeshkian signaled here that his presidency would involve a more conciliatory approach to the United States, possibly on its nuclear policy. So the United States will be watching for a potential slowdown in Iran's enrichment, or whether it increases cooperation with international nuclear inspectors. Iran's expanding nuclear program will be a major concern, regardless of who wins the American election in November. U.S. officials say Iran is just weeks away from having enough enriched uranium to make a nuclear weapon if it chooses to.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. And for our audience, Elizabeth has written extensively about the U.S.-Iran relationship over the past few years. You can find all of that on allmonitor.com.
Thanks, Kristen.
That's it for today, July 8th. You can read all these stories and more at allmonitor.com.